There's the
look at.
question of credibility here.
Yes.
There's also the question of acceptance. That when the
Yes.
National Assembly is done with all the amendments, I mean, it's after the process, and they finally
Yes.
debated and say aye and nay, that the Nigerian people will accept and say this was truly what we put into the Constitution, and
Yes.
this is what we have been given back.
Yes.
Aren't you running a risk of, you know, people not accepting it when finally this process is over?
So,
wouldn't it have been easier?
we have two processes here.
Yes.
Except you're just going to say that you don't believe that anything that is here as a political structure is, unless you believe that is worthless. The point really is, the National Assembly will do their own, like you're saying now, a very laborious process, bring it up, distill it, and take it to the state assemblies. The state assemblies also have constituents, and they can also do that. So how else are you going to distill the views of Nigerians if you have to keep this away? That is the point.
There's the issue of self-interest, self-preservation. And
Yeah.
a point came up when they were saying that, you know, maybe we should merge both chambers of the National Assembly.
Yes.
And a senator responded and say it's not very likely that one arm of the National Assembly will say, scrap me.
Yes.
You know, it's going to be, is it possible at any point in time that, assuming anything is to affect, say, the interest of members of the National Assembly or even the State House of Assembly,
Yes.
can they truly set aside their own interest and put that of the Nigerian people first?
Well, let's put it this way. The reason why you're elected is that you're going to reflect the views of your people, those who elected you. And we're assuming that everybody is elected. Therefore, they also reflect the views of their own people. And if you talk about the question of self-interest, it still comes down to this fact. Somebody will have to distill what goes into a referendum. You're not going to do a referendum on something that doesn't come from a particular process. And if the MBS says, okay, to come at the end of the process, the self-interest will still be there because it is what you get for a referendum. That is what you're going to do a referendum about. So at the end of the day, you cannot at any point say that, okay, somebody's just going to wake up and throw something in and say, go to vote on it. It's not going to be possible.
Let's look at staying with the issue of referendum and the Constitution here. But this time, a call for a sovereign national conference. But a legal luminary, Afewa Balola, was quoted as saying that amending the Nigerian Constitution, said the problem with the Constitution cannot be solved by mere amendments. It said it will need a total restructuring of the framework of the country so as to make the center and political offices less attractive. And this can only be done through the convocation of a sovereign national conference.
Yes. You know, one thing we see is that each section of Nigeria has something like a buzzword that excites them. And whenever people want to talk from that section, they will bring that up. So if you're in the western part of the country, you talk about sovereign national conference, oh yes, they like it this way. If you go to the east and you talk about state creation, oh yes, they like it that way.
But sovereign national conference appears to be across the country.
No, the point really is, it's still the same thing, the same argument with the referendum. When you say they have to have a conference, there is no provision within these constitutional provisions that we have today that will give you that latitude to go outside of this provision and do whatever you want to do. That is just it.
Are you not lawmakers?
Yes,
Representing the
and that's
people?
what we're saying. Bring it now so that we will put it into the...
Can't you, representing the people, come together in agreement? I still bring the doctrine of necessity and say, our people want this.
Yes.
Across the country, they've asked for a sovereign national conference.
Yes.
What stops the lawmakers from coming together to say, okay, let's give our people their heart's desire?
Yeah, so that is because you assume that the Sovereign National Conference is the people's heart desire. And I've just told you now that depending on where you come from, you now articulate the views of those that sent you to the center.
It's very interesting.
If you're from Zamfara and you're talking about Sovereign National Conference, the man might say, well, that's not my own problem today. My problem is how do we make Sharia? You understand? And that may be his own view. So when we sit here, when we sit in the chamber, we actually agree on most issues. You understand? And the sovereign national conference is not one of the issues that we agree on for us to now say, let everybody come and then
No,
do
but
something
it's
about
interesting because everything that we want to do must be tied to the Constitution.
That's why we have a constitution.
I know. I'm simply saying, what if we were to rewrite another constitution? Would we have to have recourse to the constitution we currently operate on?
We cannot rewrite another constitution because what we have has a provision for amendment. That is it. The only thing you can do is to go to Section 8, Section 9 for all the things you want to do within this constitution, and it's right there. You can't go outside of it. The only people who can rewrite constitution is that there will be no constitution. That means that the country is in turmoil, there's anarchy, there is no basis for law, and that is at the point at which you can say, let's bring something new, which is what we always had within the military regime, and I think we have put that behind us.
Do you think the constitution is too constraining or too restraining?
I do not think so. I've made this point, and let me make it again. There is nothing wrong with the letters of this constitution. What is wrong is us. We always seem to find a way not to do what is in the letters of the constitution. And let me give you another example. Local government autonomy. The constitution says very clearly that local government will have to have a joint state and local government account for which the states will bring in 10% of their internally generated revenue to help the local governments. Perfect thing that is there. But then what do we see? The reality on the ground is that the states, being the supervisors of the local governments, simply took over that, don't even add anything, and use the monies of the local governments, which has now brought us back to now saying, why don't we amend the constitution along that line? Will you now blame the constitution? What you blame is the operators of the constitution for not keeping to the letters of the constitution.
What do you think about this view? Because there are those who think that maybe the National Assembly already have the key priority of the kind of issues they want amended in the laws. For instance, when Senator Mark was quoted on October 29 copiously across papers that National Assembly will create more states. So something that they've made up their mind already. You just want to, get views and just see one or two things to add in addition to what the Senate or National Assembly is set out to do.
No, I don't think so. I think that the National Assembly has not, on its own, said these are the things we're going to do. The National Assembly that's why we're still going everywhere, taking in all the views of the people and trying to synthesize them. And I'm sure maybe there was a slight misunderstanding of what Senator Mark said. He probably said that we have a lot of demands. At the last count, it was 59. And we know that there are a lot still coming.
59 were requests
59 requests for states, in addition to what we have now.
Would that make
Does
any
the
difference?
Constitution prohibit extra constitutional means to doing anything?
Precisely. That is why it's a constitution. It says in the first section of the Constitution that anything that is done outside of this law is illegal.
So you want us to believe that nothing has been done so far outside of the Constitution?
Well, anything you've done outside the Constitution, you're breaking the law. And
Was the doctrine of necessity breaking the law as well?
it wasn't done outside the Constitution. If you go and look into our this in Section 88, you will have the provision for doing that. It's right in there.
Okay. If you're
good
right,
governance and all that in the
We found something that would, support the doctrine of
No, we
necessity.
didn't find something.
But we
It was
cannot
already
find
there.
anything
It
to
was already
support,
there. We
doing
didn't
a
have to find
referendum.
something. It was already there. we just did our job.
All right, let's take this question from Ifeora. He says, are we not bothered that in 3 years' time, oil may just be $5 a barrel with all the alternative energy sources? What are we doing about that?
Well, I think that we should be bothered about it. We're really bothered about it. I think that when I went for the launching of Okonjo-Iweala's book, the point was very succinct, made there. Yes, we have a resource, but this resource is a wasting asset. And if it's a wasting asset, what you do is that you don't consume today what also is supposed to be for the rest of the people coming after you. And therefore, your job, if you're consuming today, is that you must put some things aside to create other, means of wealth. I think we missed the point, really, in terms of what should be our greatest resource. Our greatest resource should be our people. It should be the brains of Nigerians. And we have seen so many countries without a single resource, Japan, Singapore, and all that. And there's yet economic powerhouses in the country, in the world. And why are they economic powerhouses? Because they have utilized their talent, which you don't have to, which does not waste, which you can only build on, to remake themselves into leaders of the world as it is today. So I think this rent mentality that we have, just take something today and then, that's a big problem.